Now, for all of you considering doing a master's degree in the US, the cost is the factor that keeps you up at night, right? Most master's students that I talk to are worried about how much it's going to cost them to stay in the US and study there. Now, while the tuition fees for various universities are fairly easy to compile, they're very clearly illustrated on the university websites themselves, you might be wondering what it costs in terms of rent, in terms of your additional expenses like mobile phones and your food. Now, one thing we've advocated a lot at Gradvine is that you need to be able to cover your tuition fees through an education loan or your personal funds or a variety of different reasons. We've strongly advocated always that your living costs, such as your rent and food and fuel, can be covered by the part-time opportunities that are available on campus. Now, over the last month at Gradvine, we've taken up a massive effort of talking to over 100 students who are living and studying in different regions and universities of the US. We've understood what their expenses are. We've understood what they're earning through their TA, RA, and part-time opportunities on campus. And we've compiled a complete information list in terms of how much they're making and how much they're spending on their additional expenses. Now, in conclusion of this video, we are going to tell you how you can cover all of your living expenses through part-time work if you are only a little smart with it. I am Sreekar Reddy. I'm the co-founder of Gradvine. Gradvine has guided thousands of students to the finest universities in the US and other geographies for their master's programs. I am certain that this video, if you are a master's applicant, is going to be incredibly useful for you. There are some financial tips that you would have never expected on the other side of this program. Now, before I talk about the costs of living and how much you're going to get paid as a TARA or a part-time employee, you'll have to understand that costs vary greatly across the US depending on which part of the US you're in. Cities tend to be more expensive. California is an expensive state overall. Smaller towns tend to be cheaper, but campus towns can be expensive. So I'm going to divide the cost estimates and your earning estimates by types of regions and types of cities. So stay tuned. Remember that we are not cooking up this data. All of this is data that has come from the actual students living and studying at these universities that we've surveyed, compiled, and are conveying to you. And of course, the students who contributed to this survey are all Gradvine students, so we are thankful for their contributions. Now, the big cities on the East Coast. New York and Boston are very, very popular destinations among Indian students and international students on the whole. So now I'm going to cite the example of a typical student at New York University, which is in the heart of Manhattan, one of the most expensive regions to study and stay in the US, without doubt. So let's look at the student-specific example as I run through the data. So based on what I see from the data, the student stays in a 3 BHK house in New York, which is costing about $2,450 in terms of rent. Obviously, because there are 3 bedrooms, 3 people are going to split the cost. Typically, the share of rent for the student is around $800. Now, if you're living on campus, then you will not have to pay additionally for utilities, but most graduate students stay off campus. So therefore, your Wi-Fi, electricity, and other general maintenance will be in addition. The other big expense that you're going to have at university is for your food. Now, depending on how extravagant or frugal you are, food can be very cheap or expensive irrespective of the geography. Just to give you a little bit of an idea, the range is going to be anywhere between $100 to $500 depending on how much you cook, how much you eat out, and various other factors. I'm not going to go into specific details of the food aspect of it for every region and every university. The big varying factor is your rent. That's what I'm going to state for each case. So the total expense for the student, which includes the rent, the transportation expenses, the food, the mobile phone, all in all is working out to around $1,500 on average. So now the expenses must be worrying you. $1,500 a month seems like a lot, and it is a lot. Well, but here comes the interesting part. So this student that we spoke to is working as a project assistant. This student is being paid around $27.5 per hour. And despite the cap on the number of hours the university allows the student to work, we see that on average, the student is making between $1,900 to $2,000 every month, which is enough to cover his living experiences and any other additional experiences that he might have to bear. Staying in New York, I'm going to give you the example of another very popular university, which is Stony Brook University. And let me read out some data and stats. Now, for the students from Stony Brook University, the living cost by and large works out to be the same, around $700. However, Other expenses are significantly cheaper because Stony Brook is not in the heart of New York City. The overall cost for this student at Stony Brook University in terms of all living costs is working out to around $1,300 per month, which again is a significantly expensive amount in most people's minds. However, once again, let's talk about the job the student is doing. So this student has a part-time opportunity as a research aide, or a fancy term for a research assistant, is being paid around $17 per hour and therefore is able to earn on an average $1,300 a month, which is covering all his living costs. Alright, moving on quickly now to students who are at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, also on the East Coast. Of course, not a big city. You will see based on the data that we have that the average living cost or rent is significantly lower. It's working out to only $475. So even on the upper end, I'm assuming it will be around $600, but in this case, it's about $475. Food expenses are also limited. It's around $100 roughly. And there are no transportation expenses because again, smaller town, lot of cases you can walk to campus. Overall, all things considered, your living expenses come up to round and about on the higher end around $700. Now, in this particular student's case, she is working as a dining assistant and therefore is getting paid $16 per hour and is earning overall around $900 per month. Therefore, you can see that it is well above the average living cost per month for the student. So now let's go into another very popular state, which is Texas. Very popular among Indian students because of the wonderful universities there and because the cost of living is low. Now, Texas A&M, UT Dallas, most popular universities among Indian applicants. Here, your average living expense on average doesn't go beyond $500. And as I'm scrolling through the data here a little bit, let's talk about the other expenses. Now, with rent of around $500, all other expenses considered, you can finish your average living experience according to the data in around $800. Now, typically, the students that we've spoken to are working as cashiers, other part-time jobs on campus. The pay on average is between $13 to $15 per hour. Even if you consider the cap of 20 hours per week, which some universities have, then all in all, you'll be earning around $800 to $1,000 per month, which is more than enough once again to cover your living expenses. Now, I'm going to another very popular student destination, which is very underrated, which you should certainly consider, which is North Carolina and the Research Triangle Park area. Now, I'm going to cover two popular universities there. Number one is Duke, which you would have all heard of, and the other is North Carolina State University. So let's look at the data. So North Carolina State University and Duke are very, very close together. Therefore, the living expenses are going to be the same. We've seen that students on average in terms of rent are paying between $500 to $550. Considering your food and transportation expenses, overall living expenses in this region are working out to around $700 to $750. Now, the data that we've gathered from North Carolina State and Duke has people earning very different ranges of salaries. We have dining associates who are earning around $10 per hour, and we also have assistants working in the gym who are earning around $16 per hour. In this region, on average, the data indicates that students are making around $600 per month. Now, this doesn't cover the entirety of the $700, $750 expense, but it is pretty close. Of course, this is from our data. There might be students who are earning a lot more than what they're spending as well. Alright, so I've given you a lot of information, but I'm going to summarize it to make life easy for you. In terms of rent, it can vary greatly depending on the region that you're in. It could be as low as $300 in a region like Clemson University, or upwards of $700, $800 at a place like New York or Boston. Now, there are certain outliers as well, like with any data. Some people spend $1,100, $1,200 a month on rent as well, but those are very, very high expenses. On average, you can see the range between $300 to around $700. Food, like I've stated earlier in this video, can be anywhere between $150, $200 to $500 per month. Overall, in terms of jobs, you can earn on the lower end around $10 to $12 per hour. On an average, most salaries lie between the $10 to $18 range, but there are certain outliers which pay you around $25, $27 as well in bigger cities. Overall, however, the data indicates that if you plan even a little smartly, you can cover all your living expenses with part-time jobs. These part-time jobs are fairly easy to get, and I've indicated the best ways to secure a part-time job, and you can check out this video by clicking right here. Now, I've given you a summary, but there are some conclusions based on the tips that these students have given us. We added a text box asking them, what is the biggest tip you want to give students who are planning their expenses and joining a master's program soon? Alright, so here are some gems and tips that we have listed on the sheet that I'm going to read out for you in the student's own words. One student says, you will get many avenues to make money and balance your finances. Just be smart about looking for them. Another student says, for a student studying abroad, the money you make is only enough for basic needs. So you need to invest wisely where necessary. Please take health insurance because it can save you a lot of money during troubling times. This is my favorite tip in the entire sheet, which can be so much useful for you guys. If you need a part-time, come early to the university, make friends and ask for a referral. You'll be earning nearly $1,100 a month if you do a part-time job. So please ask your friends and your peers and your seniors for a referral. That may be your easiest path to a part-time job opportunity. And the final tip, which is an absolute gem and which we tend to agree with as well. The US is expensive, but it's worth it. I hope this video was useful for you and not too much of an information overload, but this is accurate information which you should spend time to go through. If you found this content useful, please be sure to like, share and subscribe and spread this video as far and wide as possible.